I've vibe coded this application in just a day, and I'm going to show you my building process. In this video, I'm going to share with you my prompting tips and how I debug, so you can use all of these techniques for your own projects. On paper, the project is simple. This is to help chefs refresh their menus using AI recommendations. But in practice, we have a lot to cover, from building the interface to backend functionalities such as authentication, file storage, or communication with external APIs. So let's build. I like to start simple. So let's create a new project with a basic prompt for a landing page. The coding agent just finished its first draft and it's quite okay for a simple prompt. But if you want to build a more complex application, we'll have to go deeper in our project specifications. In fact, this is quite simple. The quality of the result you will get from a coding agent depends significantly on the context you give it. So before starting to implement any feature, I'm going to build a strong documentation for the coding agent, and it starts with the project brief. This is a quite simple document where I'll just explain the purpose of my platform. So I'll describe the problem I want to solve, the solution I want to develop, and who will be my target users. You may find it surprising that I'm not starting to implement features straight away and instead documenting my project beforehand. But writing down your project brief has two main advantages. The first one that I mentioned is that you give better context to the coding agent, and you will see that you get way better result doing so. Secondly, this document helps you refine your business vision. When building a new product, you need to validate your ID fast. But since you have no customers, you don't have any feedback. So it's hard to know if you're going in the right direction. Being assisted in this key moment of the project is crucial. And this is the exact purpose of this project brief assistant. It will challenge you on your assumptions and help you refine your business vision. I'm starting with a simple description of my project as a ground base of discussion. Cordon Bleu will be the platform that helps chefs refresh their menu with AI recommendations. I know this is a time-consuming process because I got the feedback from my girlfriend who is a chef. And this is an important process to have the regulars happy and keep the staff enjoying their job. Writing down the project brief was quite enjoyable. The assistant guided me through the completion of the document and I didn't have to write it down myself. The assistant made really good points, especially for the MVP. It suggested that it could be interesting for a chef to generate a variant of a dish. For example, making one vegetarian or changing the meat. I didn't think about this feature at first, but it makes sense because it happens all the time that customers want a vegetarian version of a dish. Now that we have our project brief, we are still not going to implement features yet. Jumping straight to implementing features is a bias that has been introduced by vibe coding tools. But this is a bad practice. If you have used a vibe coding tool at least once, you know how hard it is to have a coding agent build what you have in mind. Usually, the results is okay if it's not completely off. Building a complex application requires to be more rigorous, but it's not difficult to do so, thanks to assistants. Coding agents deliver their best results when they have the full context. And building the full context is what we are doing right now. Now that we have a better overview of our project, we are going to focus on the UX UI specifications. The purpose of this document is to simply get into the specifics of our solution. For example, the different pages and how the users navigate from one to another, or the different user flows. For example, when we onboard a new user, what should be the different steps? In our case, they will need to upload a PDF where we will extract all the dishes using an external API and then save all the dishes in database. And finally, we'll have the user review the extracted dishes. We'll also define the colors we want to use, the typography, the spaces. It may seem like a lot of information to enter and you may be lost in all this vocabulary. And that's why we developed an assistant. It will take the time to explain the purpose of each section of the document, ask you the right questions, so you only have to focus on what matters to you, building your application. We built a strong documentation so far. Where do we go from there? We are now going to boost every feature we create. To do so, I'm going to create a user story. All the documentation we wrote, the project brief and design specifications will be used to enhance the simple prompt I just entered. You can think of a user story as a list of boxes that needs to be checked to consider a feature implemented. It can also embed a technical strategy, and since the user story agent has access to the documentation of the project, it will write it down so the coding agent has all the context it needs. But the user story is just a proposition and can always be modified. As you can see, I asked the agent to display an element in the UI when the email has to be confirmed upon sign up. And now it's time to actually implement the feature. This is food time for the coding agent. I'm giving the whole user story, so it has all the context it needs to actually implement the feature. Since authentication is a backend functionality, I now need to configure my Supabase project. And boom! The login and sign up forms have been one-shotted by the coding agent. This is crazy. You may have noticed that the confirmation email redirected me to localhost instead of my platform. But this is a simple parameter that I can configure on my Supabase project. The authentication flow works properly and logged users can access their dashboard. Now it's time to move on to the next feature, the implementation of the onboarding funnel. When creating the user story, what I'm doing is just referring the user flow I described in the UX UI specifications. Since the user story agent has all the context it needs, it will draft a user story as close to what I have in mind. If it wasn't the case earlier, I think you now grasp how powerful it is to document your project. My main focus now is implementing features and I'm going fast. I'm confident that the coding agent will build something that is as close as possible to what I have in mind. I'm confident, but as you can see, the coding agent made a mistake. And this is usually where nightmare begins for most vibe coders. Hopefully, there is a systematic approach that solves most of the problems. The first thing I'm doing is understanding the issue. Here I have a pretty explicit error message displayed in a toast. I'm using it to feed my coding agent with this additional prompt. And if there is one thing you should learn from this video, this is this additional prompt that I use literally every day. Make 3 hypotheses about the cause of the issue. Then test each hypothesis and fix each one that is correct. This is a very simple yet powerful prompt because you're making no assumptions about the cause of the issue. You're letting the coding agent browse the code base and figure it out itself. Et voila! Now the onboarding process is functioning as expected. I had to use these tips twice to also fix an error on the Supabase side using the error I got in the logs of my edge functions. But now everything is working as expected. My users can upload a PDF. This PDF will be processed by Cloud and it will return all the dishes of the menu. Overall, the onboarding funnel took me 3 prompts to implement and cost me 5 credits out of 100. So I still have 95% of my credits to build my applications and make improvements. To implement the dashboard, I run through the same process. I'm first creating a user story with a simple prompt, implement the dashboard when the user is connected with its navigation bar. Once again, since the user stories agent has access to all my project brief and UX specifications, it will inject all the context the coding agent needs. The implemented dashboard is a solid base and I'm going to make small improvements. My first focus will be the current menu selector that has a background that makes the text barely readable. So what I'm doing is just making a screenshot of the section and fixing it with a basing prompt. Here I'm not using the 3 assumptions methods because I estimate that the screenshot is enough. And indeed it was. Now let's focus on something that is a little bit more complex to solve. As you can see, there is some space between the page and its content. What I want is that the onboarding funnel takes up all the width and all the height of its container. These kind of issues can be surprisingly hard to fix. That's why I'm using the 3 hypothesis technique. I'm also giving a little bit more context, asking the coding agent to remove the spaces for the onboarding funnel, but to keep it for other pages, like the AI recommendations page or the saved recipes page. And boom, fixed. Let's focus on the core feature of the platform, the AI recommendations page. So now you know the process. First, I'm creating a user story that I'm feeding to the coding agent. Since this feature is important, I'm taking time to review the whole user story. And honestly, I didn't have to make any changes. So hop, it goes straight to implementation and voila, I can now get new recipe IDs using AI. From generating new recipe IDs to consulting existing ones, I can also make variants of the proposed recommendations. The craziest part about it is that it has been one-shotted. All these features have been implemented in one shot by the coding agent. That's pretty crazy. And it's not just a front-end feature. The recommendations are made using an AI and they are saved in database. I have the core feature, but it's not perfect though. That's why now I'm focusing on improving the UI. To do so, I'm using all the techniques I mentioned earlier. It can be a simple prompt, taking a screenshot, or maybe using a full user story when I need all the context. I also use the 3 hypothesis technique to fix complex issues. Once I'm satisfied, I'm moving to the next feature. And it goes on and on and on. You get it. Every time I need to create a complex feature, I'm using a user story. That's what I did for the saved recipes page and for the complete redesign of the landing page. There is one feature I couldn't implement nor fix though, which is displaying the uploaded PDF on the dashboard. I find it fair though, because I didn't spend that much time trying to fix the issue. And in just a day, I could implement the application I had in mind. Just a day. This is actually crazy. If I had to code the application by myself, it would have taken me weeks, not hours. I hope you enjoyed the video. You have the link to the platform in the description if you want to try it out. If you want me to vibe code any project and show you the process, just leave your ideas in the comments. See you next time.